He Jing, I will start with you. The Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate, they delivered their annual work reports to the National People's Congress. They talk about the judicial reforms, anti-corruption efforts, and priorities for strengthening the rule of law. So they covered, I would say, a lot of grounds, a lot of specific cases. So, anything stood out? What stood out from the reports to you? You are a lawyer yourself.
Yes, I'm a lawyer specialized in intellectual property, AI, technology, and international rule of law. Of course, one thing really stood out for me is that the huge progress China has been making in protecting, patents, trademarks, and trade secrets. And if you're looking at the number of the cases China has been handling in the last year, I think over the total, like the 500,000 cases. And then China has been imposing a significant amount of punitive damages in the IP cases, really sending a very, very strong signal in protecting the know-hows and the trade secrets. Another number is that I was really impressed is that China recognized 900 foreign judgments from the foreign courts. That really demonstrates a really increasing and an openness in really enforcing the foreign court jurisdictions, the court judgments. That sent a very strong signal for the international rule of law.
Well, Lawrence, what's your understanding, your impression of China's judicial reform and the legal work over the past 5 years, let's say?
Yes, I've read the report, and there are a number of significance that you can gather from the reports. First is anti-corruption and cross-border governance. As you understand that Hong Kong, Chinese citizens actually went to places like North Burma to commit crimes like email scam, those called pig butchering scams and all this. And China and Burma has a joint effort to combat those cross-border offenses. That's the first significant thing. Second, if you read from the report, it would be judicial fairness. You can see that the amount of court ordering compensations on wrongful convictions has increased a lot. That means people get compensated for previous wrongful convictions. And also you see a number of cases where the prosecution dropped cases because they cannot prove their case, and they would not attempt to prove their case because there's lack of evidence. So judicial fairness has improved. Thirdly is regulation of AI laws. That means Chinese government and Chinese courts are going to pay further attention in regulating and adjudicating advanced technology AI cases. And fourthly, ethnic minority interest, which means that the court and the prosecutors have focused on women, children, elderly, and workers' interest. What it means is there are a number of cases involved domestic violence has been resolved, and those would protect women and children. And a number of labor disputes have been resolved, which protects the interest of the workers against unpaid or not against employers not paying their wages. And a number of cases on fraud on elderly has been resolved so that elderly's interests are protected. So all in all, and also the judiciary is saying they would actively direct their attention towards the 15-5 5-year plan. So there is matters in the 15 5-year plan that warrants the attention of the courts and the prosecutors. So they would actively deal with and align with those policy objectives. So these are the major features of those reports.
Yes, a lot of work, obviously, over the past year and 5 years. Dimitri, you are living in Beijing, and the chief prosecutor of China did mention that, China is one of the safest countries in the world. So, share with us, especially our viewers from other parts of the world, what's it like? Is it safe enough to live in Beijing?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say Beijing is probably the safest city that I visit, and I've lived here for 20 years now. If you leave something in a taxi, you'll be sure to get it back. If you leave a computer in the cafe and you go to the bathroom, you don't have to worry that it's going to be gone when you come back. It's really quite remarkable. And we've also cooperated very closely with the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate for the last 10 years now. And they've been extremely busy with strengthening environmental rule of law as well. And that is what ClientEarth, what my organization focuses on. Maybe it's not so highlighted this time around, but they've done incredible work. The prosecutors, they do public interest litigation for the environment. That means that they can challenge government departments at all levels, and they can challenge businesses when they're breaking environmental laws. So environmental law enforcement has really been strengthened tremendously. They brought about 80,000 such cases every year in the past couple of years. So they've been very, very busy.
That's, of course, for the sake of everybody's interest, better, cleaner air and the environment, of course. That's in the interest of everyone. So He Jing, China's top judicial bodies, have signaled a tougher stance on cybersecurity and emerging tech-related crimes, from doxing to the regulation of assisted driving systems. I think, over the past 5 years, of course, they say the courts concluded over 9,300 cases involving crimes endangering cybersecurity, an increase of more than 158% compared with the previous 5 years period. So according to the Supreme People's Court. So that number, I guess, goes along, of course, with the reality of the rapid growth of the digital industries, the tech development, the artificial intelligence in China. So that's probably also a reflection of the reality of the real development in China, in a sense.
Yes, of course. If you look at the number, you might say, wow, there's so many cybersecurity problems. But like you said, it's really another good evidence that how advanced China has become, how savvy the companies, individuals have been using the technologies, especially the social media has been so important. And it really demonstrates actually our government is becoming very sophisticated in tackling or tracking, investigating these technology crimes. Online security crimes are not easy to fight with, are not really easy. It is more than just a law. So really the increase of the successful prosecutions are the best example. The country increased or elevated the capability and the diligent efforts by our police and the prosecutors. And this is will undoubtedly make people feeling much safer in the online environment. And I think this also probably shows that the government's capability to handle what we call cross-border investigation and the enforcement. And lots of the online problems, the online crimes really cross the borders. And people sometimes hiding behind the network. And how you gonna track down the people? That really requires really the high level of the capability of the law enforcement authority. So it's really impressive accomplishment.
Speak of that, Lawrence, of course, we noticed that, one number like roughly 69,000 individuals for telecom and online fraud, they were charged. I mean, that's one thing I think a particular Chinese citizen actually feel deeply about that. That's we call the telecom scams or telecom fraud, often associated with some people from northern Myanmar. So we do see prosecutors brought charges against 285 suspects in that case. 16 principal members of those criminal groups were sentenced to death, and 39 defendants received life imprisonment. What do you make of these efforts? I think this, for a lot of people, the wish obviously to see progress in that regard, so people can feel kind of like safe, can feel arrested, like when you're surfing on the internet or when you talk to somebody online.
Yes, that's very important because unfortunately, some of these scams are run by Chinese people and they cannot run it within mainland China because it's so tightly controlled and people, the police have been doing their very best effort to tackle those crimes, so they have no room to survive or maneuver back in the mainland China. So they have to move their criminal operation syndicates in places which of a looser control. So it doesn't, for example, I'm not saying but Myanmar is a place where there's no law, but of course they may, because of lack of resources and because of the places is so big and there's lack of police forces to tackle those those criminals, and therefore they can, those criminal syndicates can breed over there and survive, and they would be able to conduct scams against people worldwide, not just mainland China. But China has done a good deed in helping the world in stopping these criminal syndicates in Myanmar, for example, because the Western countries, even their citizens got scammed, they would not have done much about apprehending people in Myanmar. So China is actually doing the world a good because of collaborative effort with the Myanmar government to give them forces and powers and ammunitions to bring those criminals back to China for trial, and you see their execution today or these days. So China is doing, we're not calling ourselves international police, but what we are actually doing is protecting the world's securities against criminals.
That's right. Well, let's move on to these three proposed draft laws. Environmental code, a national development planning law, and a law on promoting ethnic unity and progress. Let's start with this environmental code. Dimitri, tell us, what is about here environmental code? We do have all kinds of environmental protection laws, but now why the code? What's going on? What's the difference? What's the difference between code and individual laws there?
So we've also had the pleasure to work with environmental lawmakers in the past years, and they too have been extremely busy. In the last 12 years or so, lots and lots of environmental laws have been totally revamped in China, as the country is very keen to do more to make the sky blue and to protect the water and the forests and the fish. And so this code, it's sort of it's a key moment where all of those laws, more than 30 laws, are being integrated into a single piece of legal architecture. Okay, so it's like an umbrella that puts them all together under a single framework, and you have pollution control, ecological protection, and also climate action all together in one package. This is the first time that China has climate legislation. And that is very good news for China, but also for the whole world. We all want to see stronger climate action around the world. The climate crisis is intensifying. And so for China to have this first climate law is really quite amazing. And we've been very much focused on the international aspects. What does this mean for the world? But also, you have Chinese overseas investments, you have trade, international trade, you have global deforestation, overfishing, all kinds of global problems. And so can this environmental code contribute to solving those global problems? And we believe it will. So it's very good news.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dimitri, just how significant could this move, this environmental code, in terms of improving, say, the country's green efforts, improving the environment here?
So a number of legal principles can be elevated to a higher level, and that means that you can facilitate enforcement. You get better enforcement of all of these laws, and also there's better streamlining. So where perhaps previously there were overlapping areas or there might be gaps, all of that in a single framework, it's easier to address. It's also easier for lawyers to understand, or for judges or prosecutors to understand. It provides one guidebook for all environmental related work. And this is only the second statutory code that exists in China. So it's very special. It sends also a political signal. It means that China will continue to prioritize environmental governance. And that's also a very strong signal to the rest of the world. China will continue to prioritize environmental governance.
He Jing, you were nodding your head. So this is basically, strengthened efforts in terms of protecting the environment here.
Oh, yes. I think like Dimitri said, right, this actually resolves some of the like headaches when you are dealing with like dozens of laws in the same sector. And very often, like many countries, and you have multiple ministries and dealing with the sort of the overlapping areas in terms of the pollution, environment problems, and the different statutes, different laws, different regulations. Sometimes they set out, like, for example, different penalties. So which one you're going to deal with? If I remember correctly, for some water pollution issues, some water-related the laws that set out as a fine. But in other areas of environmental law, they also set out the kind of a fine. But the fine are different. The range are very, very different. So then that gives lots of uncertainty and the controversies. So I think the codification, putting everything together consistently, and also leaving some big laws still, in effect, that gives both the consistency and some flexibility to our system. Overall, right, codification is a very, very important and a symbol of this centralized effort and collective effort to handle the environmental, the law, the legal system. And you will see, I think what's going to come probably naturally would be some integrated the environmental enforcement system, enforcement teams, in China. Now be, really radically elevate the level of protection for our environments. And hopefully it'll become a really great example for the rest of the world.
Dimitri, of course, sticking to this, this codification of environmental law, you also mentioned about the climate change actions will also be included there. We know China has this 2030, 2060, climate goals there. What's the relationship? What does that mean for achieving those goals?
Right. So China's pledge to the world is to peak emissions before 2030. So we should be on a downward trajectory by 2029. And what we've seen in the last 2 years almost is a more or less flat greenhouse gas emissions from China. So it looks like potentially we're already peaking. It's not sure if that will continue. But what we do know is that in the decades after 2030, emissions have to continue to drop rapidly to get down to net zero by 2060. And what that means, it means it's a total transformation of the economy towards electrification, towards renewable energy sources. That's happening very fast, faster than anywhere else in the world right now in China, which is very exciting. But it also means that as the economy transforms into a solid legal foundation to ensure a steady and a fair low carbon transition. And this code will clarify the role of government, business, and society in this process. And so key approaches to climate change, like the national carbon market, which is rapidly growing into more sectors, and also green finance or nature-based climate resilience, will all benefit from this legal framework.
Well, let's shift to another important, of course, the draft law on promoting ethnic unity and progress. Lawrence, this is designed to strengthen social cohesion and forge a strong sense of community. Share with us more about this, the rationale or the thinking behind this move. Why is it necessary now? What is the purpose? Of course, we know the purpose. What needs to be done probably if we have this law?
Well, China is known to be a country with many ethnicities. You have the Han people, and you have the Mongolian people, you have the Zhang people. So that there are lots of ethnicities, particularly around the Yunnan, Sichuan, Tibet region. So they have different values, cultural values and traditions. And with these cultural values and traditions, they will, if they are not managed properly, it will bring into conflicts. And people or foreign forces may utilize those conflicts or differences to create cultural conflicts and emerge into a political turmoil, which would destabilize the government's rule. So it would be important to harmonize any potential ethnical imbalance. So we have to treat people equally, we have to respect people's culture, we have to give rooms for people to be able to operate within their own beliefs and traditions. So this law would give those people rights and to respect those people's rights in relation to their ethnicity and their cultures. So with these sort of protections, people would be in different ethnicities would be able to say, yes, I'm protected. You have to respect my culture and you have to respect my minority rights. So that would, in effect, would in the long term, will eliminate much of the cultural clashes between different clans. So it would bring peace and harmony to the entire China.
Mm-hmm. Of course, there are, like if you look at the international media coverage, there's a concern kind of like, China is asking these ethnic minorities to learn Chinese as kind of like a requirement. But of course, from like if you live in China, you understand, like if you don't speak the standard Chinese, it's hard to find a job, to be practical. So I would say that's probably everybody. We take it for granted, but somehow, for others, like the media in the West, they find, there's a problem. They are asking citizens to learn Chinese. Lawrence, is that a problem?
Exactly. I mean, if you go to if you go to Australia, you have to speak English. If you go to the UK, you got to speak English. Like in America, I mean, Indians in America speaks English, and Aborigines in Australia speaks English. I mean, they are able to keep their own dialects and their own culture and their own symbols. But I mean, to communicate, in order to integrate into the society, into the mainstream society, they have to speak what the mainstream speaks. So in order to, we don't coerce people in doing so, but we have to give opportunity, encourage with a policy initiative to encourage people to learn, and they of course, they should be allowed to keep their own cultures and their own language, but they have to be able to communicate with the mainstream. So they have to be inculcated in their education system a language subject, so that they, besides keeping their own languages or dialects, they should have the ability to speak Chinese Mandarin. So for that purpose, this is a correct law to be implemented.
Mm-hmm. Well, lastly, on this point, He Jing, the draft law includes provisions imposing legal liability for acts that harm or undermine ethnic unity and progress, stating that organizing, planning, or carrying out the violent terrorist activity, ethnic separatist activity, or religious extremist activities that constitute crime will be prosecuted in accordance with the law. So obviously we are looking at terrorism, separatism, and extremism. I mean, that's understandable. Obviously, that's not only against this law. I guess it's also against public security, right?
Yes, absolutely. I just want to add that what Lawrence said. I think this law that more and more of us got to really learn, actually study, and really get to know. I really can acknowledge this law as really a courageous and a big advance to build towards the concept of the community of a Chinese nation. Okay, 中华民族命运共同体. And keep in mind the way a lot of our autonomous region for ethnic ethnicities were built like 67.
Like okay, there's a tech glitch over there. Let's turn to Lawrence there. Of course, there's also China is also considering a national development planning law at the same time as policymakers are reviewing the country's 15th five-year plan. So Lawrence, share with us, what is this law about? We know it is talking about like the practice of a five-year plan. They see this as a good practice. The drawing, writing of this out plan, the implementation of this plan should be written into law, and this is part of that, of course. Share with us your understanding of this draft law here.
Yes, yes. The 5-year plan, starting from 1953, really carries our country from the very beginning to now, and leading us to be the world's second largest economy. No doubt about the effectiveness and the usefulness of the 5-year plan. But the 5-year plan before this law is a government policy. It's a policy which government officials will implement. It has been implemented successfully, but there are problems because it is only a policy, it's not a law. So in order to give it more mandatory effect, and to resolve many some of the deficiencies therein, it has now become a law. Now, if you read the draft law, you will notice that there are 4 sections to it. The first section is about formulation. So you formulate the plan first. When you formulate the plan, you have little goals along the way, and you have little milestones you got to achieve. Now, that's the formulation stage. The second stage is review and approval. So once the government has this plan, it has to be reviewed and approved by the National People's Congress for a 5-year plan. It probably have to be, all these goals have to approve on an annual basis. All right. The third is implementation. Once the plan's been approved, it has to be implemented. Resources money have to be allocated towards the implementation of the plan. You can't just have a plan without any money and finances to support the implementation. So which department, where does the money come from? So this is the implementation stage. And finally is oversight. Government departments has to monitor the progress of the plan and has to finally assess whether certain goals has been achieved. So that the law actually put out a very formal, systematic way of formulation, review, approval, funding, implementation, and supervision monitoring of the whole thing. So it's become a model, a legal model of how we should have plans in the future. So this law really gives a concrete law instead of a fluid policy, if you want to put it this way, of our 5-year plan from now on.
Yeah, higher priority of such a practice. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.